I'm a bit concerned that my honourable friend doesn't share the enthusiasm that I have for free ports and investment zones. I think the example from the past in Wales, when inspirational Secretaries of State like the late Lord Crickhowell, Peter Walker and the Lord Hunter Wirral demonstrated that through enterprise zones and the Development Bay Corporation, for example, in Cardiff, that the economy was transformed and regenerated. I am confident that in our approach to investment zones, we will make sure that Wales shares in the growing prosperity that we want to see right across our United Kingdom. And I believe that it will generate more investment and to grow that economic pie that is the aspiration of this government.
Liz Roberts.
His government has been forced to U-turn on its fundamental ideology that slashing taxes magically leads to economic growth. That same ideology underpins free ports and investment zones. Both will shrink the UK government's tax revenue and, in turn, the Welsh government's budget, which is already facing a £4 billion shortfall. With inflation now over 10%, what's he doing in Cabinet to protect Wales's budget?
No stay.
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Lady, and I yield to no one in my admiration of her, but she has now laid bare Plaid Cymru's ideological approach to things. They believe that it should be an ever-shrinking share of wealth that means that our public services will decline. We on this side of the House believe that the way to pay for public services is to grow our economy, and it's through initiatives like the free ports and investment zones that we will do just that. And I do hope the Welsh public note Plaid Cymru's ideological opposition to growth.
Roberts.
The Secretary of State is on record as saying he believes it's right to make cuts to public spending. And that was before last week's multiple U-turns. Now, according to the Glasgow Centre for Population Health, the last Tory austerity experiment led to 335,000 excess deaths. How many excess deaths is he prepared to justify this time round?
I'm sorry, hyperbole from the Right Honourable Lady does not at all help her case. And we are not talking about so-called austerity, but we're talking about making sure that the public spending round that was agreed last year will be efficiently and wisely spent. And I said that it was right for each department to look carefully at its priorities to make sure that frontline services, the sort of services that I know she and I believe in, are maintained for the benefit of the citizens we serve.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with permission, I will answer questions 2, 5, 11 and 15 together. We have taken action to support households and businesses across Great Britain, including Wales, through schemes such as the Energy Bill Relief Scheme and the £400 Energy Bill Rebate. The Welsh Government has been very well funded to deliver their devolved responsibilities, with the largest ever block grant of £18 billion in the 2021 spending review.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State's U-turn during the Tory leadership election was indeed truly eye-catching. But the U-turn most concerning people in Wales just now is the government's U-turn on properly protecting benefits and pensions against skyrocketing inflation. Is the Minister going to be U-turning on that commitment too, or will he fight a good fight in favour of proper uprating?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government will always be committed to supporting the least well-off, and that is, of course, why we have come forward with schemes such as this £650 payment for those who are on benefits, £300 for pensioner households, and £150 for those who are disabled. If the honourable gentleman is really worried about the cost of living, perhaps it's time that he got his government to start supporting the new nuclear, the new oil and gas bills that we so desperately need for that energy that people want.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've just come from chairing the APPG on poverty, where we've heard that the cost of living crisis will exacerbate the digital divide that is experienced by so many people in poorer communities. Will the Minister agree to meet with the APPG on poverty to look at how that impacts people in Carmarthenshire, in Carmyle and right across these islands?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I meet with stakeholders who are dealing with poverty all the time, but if the honourable gentleman is interested in dealing with poverty, perhaps he'll be able to find out from his own SNP government why poverty levels in Scotland are growing and why it is that even the Labour Party in Wales are doing a better job of dealing with child poverty than the honourable gentleman's government.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Secretary of State does love to tell a good story, doesn't he? But the UK government has already slashed devolved budgets by billions this financial year, and on Monday the Chancellor announced plans for millions of pounds supposed to come to devolved nations for cost of living support now to be abandoned. How does the Secretary of State think that slashing devolved budgets supports the supposed levelling up agenda?
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, just to be clear, the honourable lady gave me a bit of a promotion there. I am actually the Minister, not the Secretary of State. But Mr Speaker, I'm not telling stories, Mr Speaker. The figures about child poverty in Scotland come from Audit Scotland, which is responsible to the Scottish Government. So, Mr Speaker, I suggest that the honourable lady takes a look at the other figures, which show that far from cutting the devolved budget, the UK Government has increased it every single year to Wales by £2 billion in the last financial year.
Martin Day.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Hundreds of thousands will find themselves in fuel poverty should average energy costs rise to the estimated £4,347 a year in April next year as a result of the government rolling back on its own proposals. So how does the Minister claim that his party is fighting the cost of living crisis when his government is cutting back on the few measures it has announced before they are even implemented?
Minister.
I'm afraid I didn't hear all of the question, but I believe the honourable gentleman mentioned fuel poverty, and I would just remind him once again that this government is doing absolutely everything possible to make sure that people in this country can get access to the cheap gas, the cheap electricity and the cheap petrol which they need. And it is members of the honourable gentleman's government in Scotland which are doing their best to prevent that from happening.
Even proud.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In welcoming the contributions from our friends from the Scottish National Party to this Wales office question, can I just politely remind them that this is a government that in March 2020 stepped in to save thousands of businesses in every single one of our constituencies, protecting hundreds of thousands of jobs. And doesn't that, Mr Speaker, demonstrate that the value of staying part of the strong United Kingdom, and it demonstrates that this is a government that doesn't walk away from serious challenges but meets them head on?
Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman makes an excellent point. I couldn't put it better than myself. This government will stand for the union but also stand for the least well off in society.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Nearly 60% of my constituents on Anismore rely on off-grid energy for heating. The average cost of filling an oil tank has almost doubled in the last year. On behalf of my Anismore constituents, will the Minister look at more targeted support for those on off-grid heating and LPG gas?
Mr Speaker, the honourable lady makes a very important point. The government have obviously already come through with a £100 payment for those who are off-grid, but I believe that there are genuine issues there, and she makes a very good point, and I'm sure that our colleagues in Bays and the Treasury will be looking carefully at what the honourable lady has said today.
Alan Kern.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister has referred to the significant increases in the Welsh Block Grant over the last 10 years. And this equates to £120 for every £100 that is spent in England. Now, in spite of this very fair settlement, accepted and recognised by the Welsh Government, health waiting lists are longer, education standards are falling compared to the rest of the United Kingdom, and the economy is growing much, much slower pace. Does my honourable friend agree that the Welsh Government need to focus on the right priorities, investing in public services and getting value for money?
Well, Mr Speaker, the right honourable gentleman, my right honourable friend, was actually responsible for making sure that the Welsh Government got a more generous package than they had previously, £1.20 for every pound that is spent in England. And therefore it is very hard to understand why it is that under a Welsh Labour government the health service waiting lists have got longer, ambulance response times have got longer, people have lower standards of healthcare in Wales than they do under a Conservative-run NHS in England, and Welsh Labour need to take responsibility for that.
Sarah Green.
Question number 3, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State and I regularly engage with Cabinet Ministers on a range of transport measures. Over £340 million has already been provided for rail enhancements in Wales, including at Cardiff Central Station and for the electrification of the Severn Tunnel.
Sarah Green.
Thank the Minister for his response. Can the Minister explain why Wales is not receiving the £5 billion worth of consequential funding from HS2 that it's entitled to under the Barnett formula? And will he review this decision, something the Welsh Conservative Party is also calling for?
Well, Mr Speaker, HS2, of course, is a UK-wide project which is partly being brought forward in order to enable the maximum number of people to get out of their cars and get onto the trains and use public transport, something which I would have hoped that the Liberal Democrats would be fully supportive of. At the same time, the UK government has not only been spending money improving the rail service in Wales, but improving the rail services for travellers who go from Wales into England, such as through the Severn-tunnel electrification. The UK government has an extremely good record on supporting railways in Wales.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Avanti trains sometimes trundle along the rail infrastructure of North Wales, but these days it's an increasingly infrequent occurrence. Avanti have provided a shockingly poor service to the people of North Wales, and many of my constituents were deeply unhappy when the Department for Transport decided to extend their franchise for a further 6 months. It was to give them a further chance. Can my honourable friend please urge his counterpart in the Department of Transport to make sure it is their last chance?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, a number of colleagues from North Wales have discussed Avanti's performance in sort of colourful terms, and I'm sure that they will have listened to what the Right Honourable Gentleman has had to say, as will the Department for Transport, who I can confirm will be assessing their performance before any further contracts are given out.
Shadow Minister Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It seems, Mr Speaker, that rewarding failure is this government's guiding principle. Even members on his own side agree. Avanti West Coast is the worst performing operator on the rail network, but ministers spent an eye-watering £4 million of taxpayers' money on bonuses to company executives for, quote, customer experience and acting as a good operator. Does the Minister agree that this is simply not good enough for the businesses and the people of North Wales?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I've already said that I accept that there have been many concerns raised about Avanti's performance, but of course it all goes to show why it is important to modernise the rail network across the whole of Wales, and that is exactly what the UK government are doing at the moment.
Chris Elmore.
Number 4, sir.
Tuesday.
Mr Speaker, I have regular discussions with Cabinet colleagues on a range of topics, and of course interest rates are rightly a matter for the Independent Bank of England, and we've announced unprecedented support for households and businesses, and through our cuts to stamp duty the Welsh Government are expected to receive £70 million, enabling them to follow suit with cuts to land transaction tax in Wales.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the weekend, I met a young couple in their early 30s who are coming out of a 5-year fixed mortgage rate. Their mortgage is going up by more than £300 a month, and they squarely blame the government and the Prime Minister's poor mismanagement of our economy. It was the Conservative government that has U-turned, that has caused the economic chaos. It's the Conservatives who's caused the mortgage rates to go through the roof. And it's the Conservative government that is causing mortgage firms to withdraw all their support. Will the Secretary of State now apologise to my constituents and people across the land who are being crippled by huge mortgage increases every single month? This is Conservative failure.
And it is a Conservative government that, through Help to Buy, has helped over 361,000 people as first-time buyers onto the housing ladder. It is a Conservative government that has led to unemployment at record lows, Mr Speaker. It is a Conservative government that has increased the national living wage to £9.50 per hour. And it is a Conservative government that will lead to interest rates being controlled, which will also help mortgage holders too. The honourable gentleman's hyperbole does not serve him well.
Question number 6.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Most recent data demonstrates that households in Wales pay a price broadly on par with the average across Great Britain. On average, variable unit costs and standing charges for gas and electricity. And our energy price guarantee will save households hundreds of pounds this winter compared to current wholesale cost projections.
Mr Speaker, my constituent, Mr Evans, in the town of Kidwelly, cannot benefit from a lower tariff for electricity he uses in off-peak times because, as the engineers have explained to him, the smart meter he needs will not function owing to the almost non-existent mobile phone signal in the area. That's a failure of this UK government both to roll out mobile phone technology and to have allowed smart meters which only work on mobile phone signal. So will the Secretary now have urgent talks with ministerial colleagues to put this right and to end this discrimination?
Well, I'd be interested to take up that case in more detail with the Honourable Lady, but I think it's right to say that the government, in acting radically on energy price intervention, and indeed with its energy prices bill that seeks to break the link between electricity and gas prices, is taking the sort of action that is absolutely necessary to help households like the Honourable Lady's constituents. And I, of course, will be happy to talk further about the particular disadvantage that her constituents face.
Honourable Edmonds.
Number 7, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I have frequent discussions with my ministerial colleagues on a range of matters, including the cost of living, and as I've previously said today, we're supporting households and businesses across Wales with cost of living challenges, including on energy costs.
Diolch, Mr Speaker. People in Carmarthenshire have seen huge increases in heating costs if they're off the gas grid in oil, LPG and solid fuels. The alternative fuel payment of £100 doesn't seem to be equivalent to the cap on gas. Will you write to Welsh MPs outlining the methodology used by the British Government to calculate the AFP rate?
Minister. Well, Mr Speaker, I'm sure my colleagues in Treasury will be able to help with that. But there is one thing that the honourable gentleman could do as well if he wants to support people with cost of living challenges in Wales, and that is to persuade his colleagues in Plaid Cymru to vote against Welsh Labour's proposals to revalue council tax bands in Wales, which are going to be absolutely catastrophic for the finances of hundreds of thousands of people across Wales.
Wayne David.
Mr Speaker.
5 minutes.
Minister.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. Mr Speaker, the 4 Welsh police forces are adequately funded and will receive combined funding of up to £826.7 million in 2022-23, an increase of up to £45.1 million when compared to the previous financial year. Gwent's funding will be up £159.1 million, an increase of £9.1 million on the previous financial year.
Wayne David.
Mr Speaker, South Wales Police has within its area Cardiff, the capital city of Wales, and yet it gets no extra resources for the extra responsibilities which comes with it. So will the Secretary of State make representation to his colleagues in government to address this situation and this anomaly?
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, South Wales funding will be up to £352.5 million in 2022-23, an increase of £19 million on the previous financial year. But if the honourable gentleman wants to do something to support police forces in Wales, may I suggest that he talks to the Welsh Labour government about their failure to hand over the apprenticeship levy, which is being held back by them and should be passed on to police forces so that...
Order! Just a sec. By the way, when somebody's answering the question, can you please wait till it's been completed? Mr David was asking the question. Slane Saxby.
Question 10, please, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, floating offshore wind projects in the Celtic Sea will contribute to our net zero ambitions, our energy security, and generate economic growth and create highly skilled jobs in our coastal communities. And I regularly meet the Crown Estate to discuss progress on bringing forward the ambition of 4 gigawatts of projects by 2035.
Lane Saxby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To realise the full potential of the Celtic Sea, we need a timely consenting process from the Welsh Government. What discussions has my right honourable friend had with his Welsh counterparts on the consenting process for the development of floating offshore wind sites?
I congratulate my honourable friend for consistent advocacy for projects in the Celtic Sea as chair of the APPG, and indeed the necessity for securing timely consents is an imperative. I will continue working with the Welsh Government and with all stakeholders to ensure that we can make sure that the huge opportunity that this presents is capitalised upon.
Sir James Davies.
Number 12, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, the Wales Office has been fully supporting the North Wales growth deal as it begins to deliver projects on the ground, and my officials will work closely with all partners in North Wales to ensure that the deal continues to deliver growth and investment across the region?
Sir James Davies.
Thank my honourable friend for that answer. Perhaps inevitably, not all projects initially identified for delivery through the North Wales growth deal can be progressed, and that applies to the Bodelwyddan key strategic site. So will my honourable friend encourage a flexible approach to diverting the £10 million of funds that had been earmarked to Bodelwyddan to other economic development projects within Denbighshire?
Here.
Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's obviously a matter for Ambition North Wales to bring forward projects for the UK Government and the Welsh Government to approve, but obviously we have taken a very flexible view towards the whole thing, and I can assure the honourable gentleman that despite the international financial problems which all countries are facing at the moment, this government remains absolutely committed to supporting jobs, driving growth and levelling up across the whole of the United Kingdom, including in the honourable gentleman's constituency.
Bob Blackman.
Question 13, Mr Speaker.
James Day.
Mr Speaker, investment zones will be created right across the UK, and our intention in Wales is to design and deliver the policy in working with the Welsh Government and local agencies to increase growth.
Thank my right honourable friend for the answer. And isn't it incumbent on the Welsh Government to cooperate fully with the Government to ensure the success for all the people of Wales?
Okay.
My honourable friend puts it extremely well. We have a good example with Freeport. I very much hope the Welsh Government steps up to the plate on investment zones.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We start Prime Minister's questions with Justin Mathers.
Question number 1, please, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Justin Mathers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When the penny dropped for the Prime Minister on Monday and she realised that her budget was responsible for crashing the economy, she should have come to this House to explain herself and to apologise to the millions of people who will now be paying hundreds of pounds extra a month on their mortgages because of her mistakes. But now she's here, can she tell us, given the absolute chaos her government has created, why the Chancellor lost his job but she kept hers?
Mr Speaker, I have been very clear that I am sorry and that I have made mistakes. But the right thing to do in those circumstances is to make changes, which I've made, and to get on with the job and deliver for the British people. And Mr Speaker, we've delivered the energy price guarantee, we've helped people this winter, and I will continue to do that.
Lawrence Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that local people and local councils are best placed to decide how many houses they need and where those houses should go? And if she does, will she end the top-down approach to housing targets and reduce or preferably remove the powers of the planning inspectorate?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. We will abolish the top-down housing targets. We want decisions about homes, about infrastructure, driven by local people, not driven by Whitehall. And that's why we're setting up new, locally driven investment zones.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A book is being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently, it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I have been in office for just under 2 months, and I have delivered the energy price guarantee, making sure that people aren't paying £6,000 bills this winter. I've reversed the national insurance increase, and I've also taken steps, and we will be taking steps, to crack down on the militant unions. Now, what, Mr Speaker? I think, Mr Speaker, that is more of a record of action than the honourable gentleman in his 2.5 years in the job.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister ignored every question put to her. Instead, she repeatedly criticised Labour's plan for a 6-month freeze on energy bills. This week, the Chancellor made it her policy. How can she be held to account when she's not in charge?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our policy is to protect the most vulnerable for 2 years. But I had to take the decision, because of the economic situation, to adjust our policies. I am somebody who's prepared to front up. I'm prepared to take the tough decisions. Unlike the honourable gentleman, who hasn't done anything on businesses, he's done nothing to say he'll protect people after 1 year. He's got no plan.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister stood there and promised absolutely no spending reductions. They all cheered. This week, the Chancellor announced a new wave of cuts. What's the point of a Prime Minister whose promises don't even last a week?
Prime Minister.
Well, I can assure the right honourable gentleman that spending will go up next year and it will go up the year after. But of course, we need to get value for taxpayers' money. The Labour Party has pledged hundreds of billions of spending pledges, none of which they've retracted. The honourable gentleman needs to reflect the economic reality in his policies.
Mr. Speaker, those spending cuts are on the table for one reason and one reason only, because they crashed the economy. And working people are going to have to pay £500 more a month on their mortgages. And what's the Prime Minister's response? To say she's sorry. What does she think people will think and say? That's all right, I don't mind financial ruin. At least she apologised.
Prime Minister.
I do think there has to be some reflection of economic reality from the party opposite. The fact is that interest rates are rising across the world, and the economic conditions have worsened. And we are being honest. We're levelling with the public, unlike the honourable gentleman who simply won't do it. And what is the honourable gentleman doing about the fact that train workers are again going on strike? The fact is he refuses to condemn the workers. We are bringing forward policies. Mr. Speaker, we are bringing forward policies that are going to make sure our railways are protected, people going to work are protected. He backs the strikers, we back the strivers.
Mr. Speaker, she's asking me questions because we're a government in waiting and they're an opposition in waiting. There's no getting away from this. Millions of people are facing horrendous mortgage repayments, and she's admitted it's her fault. She shouldn't have conducted an economic experiment on the British public. But it's not just her. They put her there. They're keeping her there. Why on earth would anyone trust the Tories with the economy ever again?
I notice, Mr. Speaker, he's not actually objecting to a single economic policy that the Chancellor announced on Monday. He's refusing to condemn the strikers. We're on the side of working people. We're going to legislate to make sure we keep our railways open. The honourable gentleman refuses to do anything.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the only mandate she's ever had is from members opposite. It was a mandate built on fantasy economics, and it ended in disaster. The country's got nothing to show for it except the destruction of the economy and the implosion of the Tory party. I've got the list here. 45p tax cut, gone. Corporation tax cut, gone. 20p tax cut, gone. 2-year energy freeze, gone. Tax-free shopping, gone. Economic credibility, gone. And her supposed best friend, the former Chancellor, he's gone as well. They're all gone. So why is she still here?
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. I have acted in the national interest to make sure that we have economic stability.
Prime Minister. Order. Order. I'm going to hear the Prime Minister. I suggest that all members need to hear the answer. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. We have delivered on the energy price guarantee. We have. We've delivered on the energy price guarantee. We've delivered on national insurance. We are going to deliver to stop the militant trade unions disrupting our railways. The honourable gentleman has no idea, he has no plan, and he has no alternative.
James Grundy. Just sit down. Sit. Can I just say, he's obviously the more popular choice. Come on, James Grundy. You've got a future.
Would my right honourable friend congratulate Lee Centurion's rugby league team on their recent promotion to Super League, bringing millions to the local economy, and furthermore, would she also guarantee that our excellent women's Euros team, including Ella Toon from my constituency, Tilsley, will receive the number 10 reception that they so deserve?
Prime Minister.
Well, I join my honourable friend in congratulating the Lee Centurions on their return to the Super League. I had the huge privilege of meeting the Lionesses last week, a fantastic team who won a major tournament for us. We will host the Downing Street reception as soon as their training programme makes them available.
I look forward to Rugby League invite as well. Let's now come to the leader of the SNP, Ian Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 10 U-turns in 2 weeks, we're left with a Prime Minister in office, but not in power. And families are paying through the teeth for her mistakes. Her latest broken promise has put pensioners in the front line of Tory cuts. So, can the Prime Minister perhaps turn to her Chancellor right now, get permission to make another U-turn and commit to raising the state pension at the rate of inflation?
Prime Minister.
I honestly don't know what the honourable gentleman is talking about, because we have been clear in our manifesto that we will maintain the triple lock, and I am completely committed to it. So is the Chancellor.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's no surprising that the Prime Minister's approval ratings are collapsing with an answer like that. The worst polling result for any Prime Minister in history. She's just thrown 12 million pensioners under the Tory bus. And it's not just pensioners feeling the pain. In the last week alone,
I also want to hear Mr Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just pensioners feeling the pain. In the last week alone, inflation has risen to a 40-year high. Mortgage rates are at the highest level since the financial crash. And people's energy bills are about to rise to more than £5,000. Can the Prime Minister answer one simple question? Why does she expect everyone else to pay the price for her failure?
Prime Minister.
I don't think the honourable gentleman can take yes for an answer. I've been clear we are protecting the triple lock on pensions. And if the honourable gentleman is concerned about the economy, why does he continue to advocate for separatism, which would plunge the Scottish economy into chaos?
Gary Sambrook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Over the last couple of years, thousands of homes have been proposed or built in Birmingham Northfield constituency, which puts a huge strain on GP and dentist appointments. Would my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree with me that more needs to be done in the planning process to make sure that when we have large-scale developments, we have more capacity in those vital services?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. When we build new houses, we need to make sure there are GP surgeries, schools, infrastructure, and that's why we're introducing a new infrastructure levy to make sure more of the money from developers goes on supporting local communities.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, millions of family carers have been forced to cut back on food and heating. One told Carers UK, "My son is incontinent. If we don't wash him in warm water several times a day, this will cause him to physically decline." So how do we pay for the gas to heat the water if we are currently at max budget? Vulnerable people and carers are struggling enough already in this cost of living crisis, Mr. Speaker. So will the Prime Minister guarantee that support for the vulnerable, including carers allowance, will rise by at least today's inflation rate of 10.1%?
Prime Minister.
People are struggling. It is difficult at the moment. That's why we put in place the energy price guarantee to make sure the typical household isn't paying more than £2,500. It's why we've supplied an extra £1,200 of support to the most vulnerable. And I can assure the Right Honourable Gentleman we will always support the most vulnerable. They will be our priority.
Kay Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Brecon and Radnorshire has a proud military footprint. Not least the Cambrian Patrol exercise, which I visited last week. It is considered the Olympic gold medal in infantry training, attracting teams from across the world to compete in a 60-kilometre march over 2 days in the Brecon Beacons. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating all those who took part, not least the team of Gurkha soldiers from the Infantry Battle School in Brecon who took home a coveted gold medal, further cementing Brecon's special place in the UK Armed Forces?
I join my honourable friend in thanking everybody at Brecon Barracks who organises the exercise Cambrian Patrol each year. It is a world-class training exercise, and I congratulate Brecon's Gurkha soldiers for their fantastic achievement of a gold medal. Well done.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It took just 5 working days for the Prime Minister to crash the pound, damage pension funds and send people's mortgage costs spiralling. Her new Chancellor may have reversed almost all of her policies, but the damage has been done, and we now face yet another round of Tory cuts and austerity. So I'd like to ask the Prime Minister and those sitting behind her, why is she still at the dispatch box, and when will voters get their say on this disastrous government?
Prime Minister.
We are facing very, very difficult economic times. I took the decision I had to in the interest of economic stability. And what is important is we work together, including with the SNP, to get through this winter and grow the economy.
David Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is to be commended for securing the passage of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill through this House without amendment before the summer recess. Can she confirm that it's the government's intention that the bill should remain unamended, and in particular that the European Court of Justice should have no jurisdiction in any part of the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
I am completely committed to the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It deals with the very specific issues we face in Northern Ireland, the free flow of trade, and also making sure that the people of Northern Ireland are able to benefit from being part of the United Kingdom. And I can tell my honourable friend that any negotiations will reflect the same position that is in the Protocol Bill.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Mr. Speaker, we understand that this afternoon's vote on fracking is deemed a confidence vote in the Prime Minister. Can she give us any reason why her own backbenchers or anyone in this country can have confidence in her after her policies have caused chaos in the markets and wrecked the economy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do face very difficult economic times. I have been honest about the mistakes I have made, but what I don't apologise for is the fact that we have helped households through this winter, through the energy price guarantee, the fact that we've reversed the national insurance rise, and the fact we are taking action to get our railways running rather than being disrupted by the militant trade unions she supports.
John Barrow.
Mr. Speaker, there's been a number of low points recently, including the Republic of Ireland's football team singing pro-IRA songs in the changing room. We should never forget the sacrifice of those who paid the price to maintain the peace during the Troubles. Closer to home, recent events meant that spending is going to be more constrained than originally thought. May I encourage the Prime Minister to ensure that we retain compassion in politics in these decisions, including maintaining the link between benefits and inflation? Will she do that?
Minister.
We are compassionate Conservatives. We will always work to protect the most vulnerable, and that is what we did with the energy price guarantee. We are going to make sure the most vulnerable are protected into year 2, and I'm sure the Chancellor has heard my honourable friend's representations on the contents of the medium-term fiscal plan.
Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, like the public at large, I've supported the government in terms of the actions it has taken to support Ukraine, not least because of what's at stake there. But right now, in order to maintain that support, as the public deals with rising prices, inflation, mortgage costs and much else, Ukraine fatigue is a real and present danger. And I'm afraid to say to the Prime Minister, she is now an active driver against that public support that has so unified many of us, many of us to do what needs to be done. So in a time where resolve in support of Ukraine needs to be steeled, will she make sure that she commits from the dispatch box that the economic and military and political support won't be another casualty under this Prime Minister?
It was one of my first acts in office to make sure the military support we give to Ukraine is equal to the military support we gave this year. We must make sure Ukraine win. They can win, they will win, and they must win.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for sticking by her words and giving communities in Fylde the final say on fracking. But as always, the devil is in the detail. Can the Prime Minister assure me that local consent will be measured independently and transparently, and under no circumstances will fracking companies be directly engaged in assessing local consent? And if people in Fylde say no, that view and that decision will be respected and acted upon by this government?
Well, I very strongly agree with my honourable friend. I know this is something he cares deeply about. I can assure him that we will consult on the robust system of local consent, give clear advice on seismic limits and safety before any fracking takes place. And the consultation will consider all of the relevant people, the regional mayors, the local authorities and parishes, as well as the concerns of those directly affected. And my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will be saying more about this later today.
Kate Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privatisation does not work. It doesn't work for our NHS. We have another Amber Alert in the NHS Blood Service, a service that this week's Chancellor sold when he was Health Secretary. And it doesn't work for our postal service, with Royal Mail Group taking £758 million in profit last year, yet our universal service obligation is at risk. Workers' pay conditions and 10,000 jobs are at threat. Will the Prime Minister continue to let obscene amounts of profit be made while services are cut and stamp prices rise, or will she launch an inquiry into the gross mismanagement of Royal Mail?
Minister.
What we need is an efficient postal service that delivers for people across this country, and that's what I'm focused on, not making ideological points.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I was in business,
It was a real privilege to employ very many talented, bright young people. I always found that when you believed in somebody, when you gave them the opportunity, they went on to thrive in their career. That's why tomorrow in North Norfolk I'll be launching my new scheme, the 100 Apprenticeship Challenge, to drive 100 new apprenticeships all over a rural constituency. Would the Prime Minister please thank not just my DWP office and Julia Nix, who's been fantastic, the district councils, the county councils and an awful lot of stakeholders who worked for over 6 months to deliver this fantastic scheme to drive growth and jobs for young people across my constituency.
I do want to thank Julia and her team for the fantastic job they're doing, and also you as the local member of, my right honourable friend as the local member of Parliament. Apprenticeships are a fantastic way for people to learn and gain experience, and I'm proud that we've created 5.1 million apprenticeships since 2010.
Smith. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff is in hot water after lobbying on behalf of a Libyan warlord and big tobacco. It turns out he's also lobbied for PPE giants Sante Global. Is it wise to have a lobbyist at the centre of Downing Street?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all appointments in Downing Street are properly checked through the propriety and ethics process, and that is the way that we do it in a completely impartial way.
Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When my right honourable friend was Foreign Secretary, I know that she was acutely aware of the importance of British soft power acting in our national interest. Will she confirm today the promise we both made in 2010 when this government first came into office, that she will not balance the books on the backs of the poorest people in the world?
Minister.
Well, can I pay tribute to my right honourable friend for the fantastic work he did as International Development Secretary, and I am proud that we have rebalanced our international development budget to focus more on humanitarian aid and more on women and girls, and no doubt more details will be set out in due course.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last Tory Prime Minister was forced out after a series of dodgy dealings and failing to take responsibility for any of it. So what's this Prime Minister getting the boot for? Her plan that crashed the economy, forcing fracking on communities who don't want it, or will she do the decent thing and go and call a general election?
I have taken responsibility and I have made the right decision in the interests of the country's economic stability.
Steve Bryan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every single member in this House will have constituents waiting for treatment within the COVID backlog. The Health Secretary's priorities are absolutely right, including her B for tackling the backlogs. Can the Prime Minister reassure me that the government is committed to the series of elective hubs that we've promised, including at the Royal Hampshire County Hospital in my Winchester constituency?
Prime Minister.
Well, my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, has set out her plans to deliver on dealing with the COVID backlog, and she will continue to work on that and make sure we deal with what was a massive pandemic, creating a backlog. We will deal with it.
Bernie Gardner.
Since the mini-budget, thousands of my constituents have been in mental anguish and despair. I recognise that the Honourable Lady has faced a week of mental anguish and despair herself. She has had people angry with her, she's had people who have mocked her. But having had that experience, what will she now do to improve the healthcare, the mental health care for people in this country, so that the anguish that they face in the coming months is properly responded to and dealt with?
My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, has set out a very clear plan of how we're going to deal with the backlog created by COVID, how we're going to make sure people get timely GP appointments, and how we're going to improve on the services in our hospitals, including mental health services.
Waitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is facing tough choices, but people living with dementia face unlimited care costs, and that is not a choice. Can my right honourable friend assure me that she is committed to social care reform to end that worry and relieve pressure on the NHS?
Prime Minister.
Yes, we are committed to social care reform. We do need to deal with those issues.
Greasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always better to see a Prime Minister at her desk rather than underneath it. And now that she's here, I wonder if she could tell us why next week this House will be discussing legislation that will abolish vital protections on pension payouts. It will abolish our right to watch the Olympics free of charge and airline consumer laws. How is any of the retained law bill in the British interest?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think we have yet another example of somebody who doesn't want to support the British public's decision to leave the European Union in 2016. Isn't it quite incredible, Mr. Speaker, that 6 years after people voted to leave the European Union, there are people who object to taking EU law off our statute books. Now, I'm a Democrat. I respect what British people voted for. I suggest the Right Honourable Lady does the same.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, 30 years ago, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy was created out of the war in Bosnia so that democracies could flourish and freedom and prosperity come with it. This evening, in your rooms, we celebrate that anniversary by hearing directly from our country representative in Ukraine, from the chair of the Taiwanese Foreign Affairs Committee, and the leader of the opposition in Uganda. A good example of the range of contacts that this great cross-party body, funded by government, is working with. Can I ask the Prime Minister if she agrees that this is a vital contribution by our government and our people to democracy around the world, and will she encourage members around the House to join us this evening?
Prime Minister.
Well, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy does a fantastic job, and I think we know from what has happened in Ukraine, the appalling war perpetrated by Vladimir Putin, just how precious democracy is and how much we need to do to work with our friends and allies to protect democracy around the world. And I do encourage colleagues from all sides of the House to attend the event tonight.
That now completes Prime Minister's questions. I'll let the House clear. Just let them go. Right, point of order, Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to catch your eye on this, and I seek your guidance. Yesterday, the Foreign Office Minister was in a way dragged to the House to answer a question about what the government would do over these brutal attacks that took place in Manchester, inside a city, which the Chinese representatives were assaulting an individual and also tearing down and creating vandalism outside. The Minister said that the officials would be called to the Foreign Office to meet a Minister of the Crown, instead of which today we discover they met an official who simply rapped them over the knuckles by saying they should stand by the freedoms that we have in this country. Can I ask, therefore, is it feasible for us to get the Minister back to the dispatch box to ask why were they not told that if they do not follow our rules, they get expelled, and to say that all those responsible for the assault in Manchester will be expelled from this country.
Obviously, it's not a direct matter for me, but what I would say, and I think there are many avenues that could be pursued, and I'm sure that a UQ could possibly and likely be submitted. I'm not saying it will be accepted, but it could be looked on favourably, because I think we were all appalled by those images, and quite rightly, action needs to be taken. Right. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, the Transport Select Committee heard from the Transport Secretary that the Government will axe its commitment to create Great British Railways in this parliamentary session. There has been no written statement to announce this decision, and I am not aware that application has been made to you, Mr. Speaker, for an oral statement either by the Secretary of State. We were expecting a transport bill in this session to facilitate the transition of the operations of rail to Great British Railways and to create a controlling mind for the railways out of the chaos which has existed since the Conservative government fragmented and privatised rail in 1993. As part of this process, the former Transport Secretary launched a competition with huge fanfare for a future headquarters of the railway. 42 locations applied, 6 were shortlisted, and have expended huge amounts in order to win this. Yep.
I'm just going to... No, please. The point is, a point of order is meant to be a point of order, not a full statement about government policy and everything. So I'm sure you're going to come to the end quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for your guidance, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of jobs could be at stake as a result of this. So could you please advise me how I can take this matter forward, since the Secretary of State seems to have failed to write either a written statement or bring forward an oral statement to this House?
Can I first of all say I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving me notice of a point of order. The honourable member has put a point on the record. I recognise this is a very important issue. To other members as well, is there is an important policy development on this issue. I would expect it to be announced in this House first, and I'm sure the government benches will have heard this exchange, and I'm sure the honourable member will pursue this matter in different avenues that are available to her. Now then, Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a procedural matter, yesterday morning I was successful in having a debate in Westminster Hall that was entitled that this House has considered British passport ownership by Northern Ireland residents. This is a matter I've taken up over many years, and Mr. Speaker, it remains unresolved. But on every other occasion that I took the matter up, it was Home Office ministers that responded, and I had hoped that the word British passport ownership might have given a clue to the Home Office to ensure that a Home Office minister actually replied. While I was glad to have a Northern Ireland Office minister to reply, can you, Mr. Speaker, ensure that the appropriate ministerial department responds to debates such as this one in the future?
What I would say is I'm also grateful to the honourable member giving notice of a point of order. The decision about which the minister should respond to a debate is unfortunately a matter for the government rather than for the chair. However, I am sure the government benches will have heard the comments and will bear them in mind and regard to, and I know the honourable member will also pursue through the different avenues. Tim Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, you may be aware, sir, that today the Right Honourable Member for Calder Valley, the Government Deputy Chief Whip, has written to Conservative members telling them regarding the debate this afternoon on fracking, and I quote, "This is not a motion on fracking, this is a confidence motion in the government." Would he give guidance to all sides of the House, but in particular to the Prime Minister, what would happen in the event that the government was to lose that vote this afternoon? If the government has lost the confidence of the House, surely, and I would be grateful for your guidance, that would mean that the Prime Minister must then go to the Palace, see His Majesty the King, and ask for a dissolution of Parliament and a general election. Am I right? Would he give clarity?
First of all, I'm not going to enter into a debate on internal communications, and I've no doubt that he'll have had some of his own communications, which happens within all parties, and if it doesn't, I will be shocked. What I would say is, let's not prejudge the decision what may take place later, and as you know, you asked the question because you knew the answer. Dr. Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In her response to some of the questions today, the Prime Minister claimed that no household would pay more than £2,500 a year. The £2,500 is an average, and therefore almost half of households will pay more. So how do we go about getting the Prime Minister to correct that in the record? She said no one would pay more, and that is incorrect.
I'm not going to continue the debate. It's not for me to answer, but you certainly put it on the record. Now then, let's come to... No, hang on, with one more important one here. Angus Brendan McNeill.
Mr. Speaker. Clearly, UK politics now more resembles Germany, with the Chancellor effectively in charge. So why was the member for South West Norfolk answering for the government at the last question time, when in fact the member for South West Surrey is in charge?
Not a point of order, as you well know. That was a poor effort. You're better than that normally. Come on, Chris Brown.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. This is further to the point of order from the former leader of the Liberal Democrats earlier. You're quite right, of course. It's not for you to comment on internal communications amongst Conservative MPs. However, by tradition, when a motion is being declared a motion of no confidence or of confidence by the government, the Prime Minister makes that announcement at some point during the debate. Is there any means whereby she could do so today? That is certainly, as I understand it, I look across the faces over there, they all seem to think it is now a motion of confidence. And historically, in every situation, lots of different things have been made, have been made confidence motions in the past, including the conduct of war, including various different bills. Traditionally, every single time that has happened in the past and the government has lost, it has led to a general election. Is that not just factually correct?
And you've certainly put on the record, but I would say once again, let's wait and see what this afternoon unfolds, and we will see where we go from there. Right, no further points of order. I now come to a 10-minute rule bill from Kenny McCaskill.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to abolish higher standing charges for customers with prepayment meters, to require energy companies to provide social tariffs for low-income customers and for connected purposes. Energy costs are the social and economic issue of our time, yet the steps taken to mitigate the pain of rises is far from adequate. Fuel poverty is soaring and winter is nearing. That Scotland, which is energy rich, should find over half its people fuel poor is absurd, and the pain is likewise felt south of the border, even if the climate is less severe and the natural bounty less kind. Additional action is therefore required across the country and urgently, especially for those most desperate and most vulnerable. The additional $2,500 isn't a cap, but the average cost. Past support has provided modest finance, but which has been inadequate for most to keep pace with soaring costs. Fear is turning to horror as bills escalate in the knowledge that even this support is only there until April. Beyond the government's soundbites, hardship remains, and the cost of energy will bite many severely, if not devour them. Anomalies and injustices remain which must cease. The most appalling is the perversity of prepayment meters having higher standing charges. A social tariff for those poorest and most vulnerable, as exists in many other countries, must also be introduced. That is what lies at the heart of this bill. It's supported by Energy Action Scotland and National Energy Action, who know the fuel poverty faced by those whose interests they represent, as well as by Age Scotland, who advocate on behalf of older people. I'm grateful for their endorsement. Scotland is disproportionately affected, with some 500,000 prepayment meters, but across Britain it's still significant, with 4 million households having higher costs imposed by PPMs. Action to address these injustices is both right and necessary, as fuel and energy costs are not luxuries but necessities. Their implications in our modern society go far beyond heating your home. Power and energy are required for so many basic aspects of our life. The inability to provide them undermines the ability to function in our society or to maintain dignity and self-respect. Of course, a new euphemism has entered our lexicon. That's a phrase of self-disconnection. It's misleading. It's insidious. It's akin to those other phrases that are meant to hide horror or injustice, such as collateral damage, when what's meant is the killing of innocent civilians. What does self-disconnection mean in reality? It isn't someone who simply chooses not to switch on the heating, nor is it referring to the past generational, though no doubt fast returning, parental demands to switch off lights or turn off the shower. Instead, it's a situation which many now find themselves in, where they simply cannot afford to switch on, either through buying a power card or simply turning on the heating or any other powered appliance. It's not voluntary. It may not be imposed through any law or enforced at the barrel of a gun, but it's forced upon them through circumstances over which they have no control. And it's why this bill and the actions it requires is necessary. For disconnection, or more likely self-disconnection, has widespread implications which are horrific, yet masked by benign euphemisms. It's not simply the horror of choosing between heating and eating this winter. That alone is bad enough. But the implications of being unable to access power go far beyond that. It's the mother who wishes to wash her children's clothes for school so she can keep them clean and smart. It's the youngster that needs to charge their phone to access employment opportunities that they desperately seek. It's the parent who wants to power up the iPad given by the school so that their child can improve their education and hence their life chances. It's the dialysis patient who requires to switch on the machine they require for life itself, never mind others suffering from cancer or sick from other illnesses and who feel the cold more, yet are unable to provide or even denied that modest comfort during convalescence or even shamefully at end of life. Compounding that injustice are accrued standing charges, even when users have been sparing in their consumption. Many will find that their power card or savings are immediately consumed by paying debt before they even get a modicum of power. As I said, fuel and energy costs are about more than just heating or eating. They're about dignity, they're about opportunity, they're about life itself. This has not come about through some climatic disaster, as has tragically afflicted Pakistan, nor can it be blamed solely on Putin and the war in Ukraine. These are policy issues overseen by the UK government and where injustice and iniquity has been allowed to take root. Much of that can be addressed by the ending of higher standing charges for prepayment meters and through the implementation of a social tariff for those with least and most vulnerable. After all, it is not just unjust but perverse that those with least should pay most for energy, especially when those with most are paying least in their tax burden. I accept that some have found prepayment meters helpful for budgeting, although the strength of that argument has been sapped, if not ended, by the arrival of smart meters. There's also the situation of private landlords who wish to ensure that they avoid costs if a tenant should depart without paying their bill. Again, smart meters offer some solution, but again the issue isn't the meter itself, but the tariff charged. 13% of smart meters are on prepayment tariffs. Mr. Speaker, technology is meant to liberate us, not perpetuate injustice. Prepayment meters, whether smart or otherwise, can remain, but what must end are the higher standing charges and tariffs. They are simply unacceptable any time, but most especially now. Both Ofgem and energy suppliers testify to the technical capacity to make that change. What is required is the political will, which is why I proposed this bill, and it has widespread support within and without Parliament. It would of course require a very modest tariff increase for those paying on credit, but the numbers involved and the amount of energy consumed through PPMs make it a very small burden upon those of us more fortunate. Likewise, a social tariff is a concept whose time has come. Ending the burden on those poorest and most vulnerable through changes to PPM tariffs must be matched by the availability of a social tariff, one where those poorest and most vulnerable can access energy and at affordable rates. It is a concept that has the support of those organisations I mentioned earlier with regard to action on prepayment meters, Energy Action Scotland, Age Scotland and National Energy Action. But it's also a concept argued for by the Fuel Bank Foundation and by Fair by Design. Again, organisations working at the heart of those whom the fuel and energy crisis is hitting hardest. It's not impossible, let alone unheard of. Even before the current energy crisis and emergency measures being invoked, other countries provided for the poorest and most vulnerable. A federal law in Belgium protected residential consumers with low income or precarious situation. That social tariff saw almost 10% of electricity users pay 34% less, and a similar figure of users for gas pay between 38 and 48% less. Those were the poorest and most vulnerable, and certainly those facing the most acute need and difficulties. There, the social tariff covers people receiving minimum income benefits, people receiving an income replacement benefit, people with disabilities receiving integrated support, and people in receipt of an income guarantee benefit. Who would quibble with those priorities or dispute that those people have additional need for fuel and energy, which requires that they be charged on a tariff that recognises that? Belgium isn't alone in operating a social tariff. Again, even before this crisis, Spain provided a social bonus scheme whereby a 25% discount was available on electricity bills for vulnerable energy customers, including disabled customers, with a 40% discount for severely disabled customers. Other countries also take the appropriate action, even if criteria, eligibility and amount may vary. But the urgent need remains that in this time of crisis, those poorest and most vulnerable require most support and should pay the lowest tariffs. That and the injustice of higher charges being imposed them must end. It's why this bill is necessary. Energy, fuel and power are fundamental.
Order. I'm just saying, it is a 10-minute rule, Bill. You've gone beyond the 10 minutes. I hope you can quickly sum up. Kenny McCaskill.
Indeed. I simply say, Mr Speaker, that Scotland is energy rich, that Scots are fuel poor. It's absurd that it should be replicated across the UK is shameful. Worse than that is the perversity that those poorest and most vulnerable pay most. That must end, and this bill will ensure that. I beg leave to move.
Right. That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question... One of us is going to have to sit down. Might be better if I stand for this bit. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Neil Hanvey, Richard Burgon, Angus Brendan McNeill, Alistair Carmichael, Liz Saville-Roberts, Margaret Ferrier, Alison Thewlis and myself.
Kenny McCaskill.
Thank you. Energy costs, prepayment meters and social tariffs bill. Second reading what day?
Friday, 24th March 2023.
Friday, the 24th of March 2023. You're right. Right. We now come to the Opposition Day motion on economic responsibility and plan for growth. Inform the House that I have not selected the amendments, so I now call Rachel Reeves to move.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We are here because of a Tory crisis made in Downing Street but paid for by ordinary working people. Exactly. The Conservative mini-budget of the 23rd of September will go down in history as the day that the British government chose to sabotage its own economy. We saw the Conservatives hurl unfunded tax cuts towards the wealthiest, with excessive borrowing and yet more government debt. This government sets our economy ablaze, and as a direct result, in the last 4 weeks, we have experienced chaos in financial markets, repeated emergency interventions from the Bank of England, warnings from the ratings agencies, and rebukes from the International Monetary Fund. And these costs are passed directly on to working people. I'll give way.
For being so generous, giving way so early. Would she join me in welcoming the employment statistics last week, the highest since 1974, and in my constituency alone, 920 extra people were in work compared to 12 months ago.
Very good.
The truth is, 1 million people are missing from the labour market. Half of those with long-term health conditions. We need to do much more to get those people back to work. And one of the reasons why unemployment is low, because so many people aren't even looking for work because they're waiting for NHS operations that are at an all-time high. Today we learn that inflation has gone above 10% again. Food inflation at more than 14%. Electricity prices up 45% in the last year alone. Gas prices having doubled in the last year. And despite all the extraordinary and unprecedented U-turns in recent days, the damage has been done. This Conservative government has wrecked people's finances and snuffed out the dreams of home ownership for millions. 1.8 million people across the UK will be paying higher mortgage bills by the end of next year, on average £580 extra every single month, because of the reckless actions by this government. In my own constituency, in Yorkshire, £360 extra a month. In the Honourable Gentleman, the Minister's constituency, who's just about to respond to me, £640 extra every single month in higher mortgage payments. Families cannot afford to pay these higher mortgage costs, and they certainly can't pay them with apologies from the Prime Minister. The public won't accept that the arsonists who inflicted this damage can put out the fire. The Tories can never be trusted with our economy again. I'll give way.
I'm grateful to my Rumble friend for giving way, and I'd congratulate her on the motion that she's brought today. It seems to me utterly unarguable that the crisis that is now being wrought upon our constituents lays squarely at the feet of the government. It would appear that they agree with that because, according to briefings on Twitter, not intending to vote against it. So does she agree with me that the fact that the Chancellor hasn't even turned up to defend the record, and that the party opposite don't even seem to disagree with the motion, means that we can all agree that it's the fault of the government?
I agree with my honourable friend that it is a shame that October's Chancellor is not in his place today. This crisis has been co-written by every single member of the Cabinet and every single member of the government. The Armed Forces Minister was crystal clear yesterday in pointing out that all Cabinet Ministers had approved and are responsible for government decisions, including the disastrous mini-budget. There is no credibility or stability with this government, just a shambles. And all the time, businesses are looking at the state of this government and deciding where and whether to invest. The Tories' recklessness and enduring incompetence will cost jobs and investment here in Britain. The Conservatives should not be put in charge of a tombola, let alone the British economy. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Can I commend the honourable lady for what she's saying, and just to back up the issue on economic growth and the honourable lady referred to. We need SMEs to be able to survive this, to get through. I've just, in my own constituency, Mr Speaker, and to the Shadow Minister, had a business that opened some 2 months ago. It's a Japanese restaurant. They're doing really well. They employ staff, but their bills have went up from £900 to £3,000. It's quite clear, unless something happens for businesses that are productive, create jobs, if it doesn't happen soon, that they will no longer be there. Does the honourable lady agree that within this we need to have a process that helps businesses?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention. Small businesses, like the restaurant that he mentions in his constituency, are the backbone of all of our constituencies and of our economy more widely. And an energy bill increase from £900 to £3,000 is just not affordable for small businesses. The government need to do more to help. I'll give way and then I'll make a bit of progress.
Honourable Member for giving way. I know she takes economic issues very seriously. Protecting pensioners is obviously going to be a key priority going forward. Will she join me in welcoming the Prime Minister confirming that the triple lot will be protected? And can she set out what Labour's policy is on that vital area?
Well, on Monday, the Chancellor said that he couldn't rule out breaking the triple lock, and on Wednesday, the Prime Minister, and we don't know which one speaks for the government, but Labour are clear, we support the triple lock. It was in our manifesto, and unlike the party opposite, we would stick by what we promised in government. Now, strong and independent economic institutions are essential for making Britain a great place to invest. That's why undermining the Bank of England, sacking the respected permanent secretary at the Treasury and gagging the Office for Budget Responsibility have all added to borrowing costs for Britain, for government and for families. But yet again on Monday, we had the ridiculous spectacle of a Conservative Chancellor coming to the House of Commons to announce huge changes in government economic policy without any sort of independent forecast. Failing to publish a forecast was a significant contribution to the lack of market confidence when the government unleashed their mini-budget 3.5 weeks ago. And yet no lessons have been learned. The government cannot build confidence in Britain by flying blind. That is why we are asking all MPs to vote today to publish the current assessments and forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility immediately. For the sake of our economic stability, they must not remain hidden for a further 2 weeks. And if the Chancellor refuses to do so, the country is right to ask, what have they got to hide?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. She touched on one point, the fact that I think one of the very first decisions that new Prime Minister made was to sack the permanent secretary to the Treasury. I wonder if she can shed any light on why that decision was made. Was it because, as appears very likely, because he was set to warn the new Chancellor of the consequences of the policies he wanted to announce?
I thank my right honourable friend for that intervention, and as a former Treasury Minister, he knows how things are supposed to be done. Now, we can't ask September's Chancellor why he sacked the respected permanent secretary, because he is no longer in his place. But a Labour government would respect the Bank of England, respect the independent civil servants and remove the gag on the Office for Budget Responsibility. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the inflation numbers today show the impact that higher gas and electricity bills are having on family finances. The government's mistake when announcing their package a month ago was putting the entire cost of that package onto government borrowing. Labour's plans would have ensured that energy producers, including the oil and gas industries, who themselves have said that they've got more money than they know what to do with, would have asked them to pay their fair share. Our plan did what a responsible government should do, and put forward a fully costed and a fully funded package to freeze bills this autumn and winter. The Conservatives have left tens of billions of pounds on the table and pushed all of the costs onto current and future taxpayers for years to come. And now, because of their irresponsible and reckless approach, they've gone back on their word. And according to the Resolution Foundation, this could mean a typical bill rising to at least £4,000 from next April. I'll happily give way.
She's very generous in giving way. Can she confirm, though, that whatever her policy on a windfall tax, the overwhelming majority of her energy support package would have been paid for by borrowing?
The point is that this government is leaving billions of pounds on the table of unneeded and unnecessary borrowing. Why leave that money on the table when even the energy giants are saying they've got more money than they know what to do with? All of that money put on borrowing, put on debt, to be paid back by current and future taxpayers. Tens of billions of pounds left on the table by this Tory government. It has always been a question of who pays for support with bills. The Conservatives always put it on the never-never. But in the end, it is working people who pay that price. In August, Bloomberg reported that government estimates of energy company windfall profits in the UK over the next 2 years could be £170 billion. Now, the previous Chancellor disputed that, the last one and the one before that, but neither confirmed how much the actual figure was. Why not? Now, Labour's fiscal rules, which would protect the economy and protect families, we shouldn't borrow a penny more than is absolutely necessary. And that is why today's motion calls on the government to publish its estimates of expected windfall profits from energy giants in the UK over the next 2 years. It's in the public interest to do so, and the refusal to publish will only confirm that the government is again putting the profits of the energy giants ahead of sky-high bills for families, pensioners and businesses. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to her for giving way. Does she agree with me that the government has still not learned a single thing? If they had learned anything from their mismanagement, the Prime Minister would have, with the new Chancellor, committed to and should be committing to using the profits of energy companies, as she says, who want to be taxed, to pay for the government's failures, rather than cutting public services and hiking mortgage interest. Does she agree that the government needs to get its priorities straight and get rid of also the cap on bankers' bonuses?
I thank my honourable friend, and as a member of the Treasury Select Committee, she understands these issues well. The Chief Executive of BP says that his company is like a cash machine at the moment. We should be ensuring that companies pay their fair share. The war in Ukraine, the illegal invasion of Ukraine, means that those companies are making windfall profits that they could never have dreamed of. But those windfall profits also mean the highest bills ever for families and pensioners. Those energy companies should pay their fair share. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She's making an excellent speech in this debate. And the author of the Institute of Health Equity report on fuel poverty, Professor Sinha, said there is no doubt that children will die this winter. And in July alone, 12,000 more people phoned the Samaritans. These are the dire consequences of these political actions, yet our energy companies are taking the profits. Would she agree?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I'm going to come on now to that important issue that she speaks about public services, because the Chancellor has been quick to put public services in his sights. This week, the respected Institute for Government gave their assessment of the state of public services after 12 years of Conservative governments. They say, and I quote, "Public services are in a fragile state. Patients waiting half a day in A&E, weeks for GP appointments, and a year or more for elective treatments. Few crimes result in charges. Pupils have lost months of learning." What an absolutely devastating verdict on this government's stewardship of our public services. Even the Home Secretary, when she's not arguing with tofu, admitted that the police force is so stretched that they cannot respond to the victims of crime. They are living on another planet if these Tories think that after a decade of imposing austerity, they can come back with season 2, wildly swinging the axe on the country's already struggling public services. I'll give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and she is making an absolutely spot-on speech that the other side should listen to, because we have seen 12 years of cuts to our public services and our facilities. But one small glimmer of hope for the people in my city was a successful levelling up bid for a leisure centre in the outer west of Newcastle. However, that project is now being undermined because of this disastrous economic outlook and soaring inflation costs, part of which is a result of the mini-budget. So does my right honourable friend agree that the government must not backtrack on its promises and must support these projects to be delivered despite the rising inflation costs that are now undermining the ability for local government to deliver on them?
Levelling up has truly been replaced by trickle-down, and my honourable friend's constituents are paying the price for that. We need strong public services focused on early intervention and prevention, reducing greater demand with better outcomes for people. We need the government to stick to those manifesto commitments that they made, including uprating benefits and pensions in line with inflation. It should not be working families, pensioners and the most vulnerable who pay the price for these Tory mistakes. Now, we'll make a bit more progress. Labour will get value for money for every pound of taxpayers' money spent. That's why I announced last year that a Labour government will introduce an Office for Value for Money, tackling the endemic waste we've seen under these Tories. Under the Conservatives, £11.8 billion of public money was handed to fraudsters and organised criminals because of a refusal to include the very most basic security checks for COVID support. And that's before you get to the £7 billion spent on unusable PPE, or the £13 billion that was wasted on failed defence procurements, or the millions and millions flushed down the drain by this government's outsourced Serco test and trace system. And now, this week, we read reports that the Treasury is shutting down the Taxpayer Protection Task Force that it belatedly set up in March to try and retrieve the money that the government gave to the fraudsters. This task force shouldn't be shut down, it should be empowered to get taxpayers' money back. Exactly. And as for the £3.5 billion handed out to friends and donors of the Conservative Party, many of whom failed to deliver on those contracts. In business, if you award a contract and it doesn't deliver, you claw that money back. Yeah. The government must now stretch every sinew to get that money back because taxpayers demand it, and that comes before the cuts and the austerity that this government is about to unleash. Now, the government says that working people now have to put up with eye-wateringly difficult decisions. But there are so many easy decisions that the government could make to stop families from feeling the pain. Why keep in place an outdated and unjustifiable non-dom tax status loophole, which means some of the wealthiest pay no tax on their incomes, while ordinary working people face the highest tax burden in 70 years in this low-growth, high-tax economy? Labour's principle is clear. If you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here. And research from the LSE and Warwick University has shown that the UK's non-dom system costs us £3.2 billion a year. And look at the tax break for private equity managers, which was cooked up in the 1980s by a Conservative government, giving a tax break of almost £200,000 each to 2,000 private equity bosses every single year. It's not right that bosses pay a lower rate of tax on their bonuses than workers do on their wages. Yep. It is indefensible, and so Labour will abolish it. And right now, private schools enjoy charitable status, which means that they are exempt from both business rates and VAT at a cost of £1.7 billion every year. But here's the truth, Madam Deputy Speaker. Private schools are not charities, and so we will end that exemption and put that money back into our state schools. That is what a fair tax system looks like, and that is what Britain will get with a Labour government. Fiscal responsibility and a fair tax system that puts working people first.
Finally, you care about something.
Labour will stabilise the economy by being responsible with public finances through our fiscal rules. It is on this foundation that our Green Prosperity Plan will invest in the jobs and industries of tomorrow as we meet our climate obligations and secure our energy supply here in Britain. There are great opportunities for the industries of the future, for government to partner with industry and invest. In domestic renewables such as wind, hydrogen, carbon capture and in nuclear too. Labour will create a national wealth fund so that when we build British industry, the public has a stake and gets a return on that investment. The next Labour government will buy, make and sell more here in Britain with an industrial strategy that is pro-worker and pro-business. We will breathe new life into our high streets by calling time on the outdated model of business rates. That's a real plan for the future, not lurching from crisis to crisis like the Conservatives. So much damage has been done to our economy by the Conservatives' reckless mini-budget. But I've almost run out of time. It's been 20 minutes and I have taken a lot of interventions. So much damage has been done by the reckless mini-budget. But the government can stop things from becoming even worse. Today they can show that they have listened and publish the Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts and assessments that they are sitting on. so that we know the true state of our public finances and of our economy. The government should publish their assessments that they already have on the windfall profits of the energy giants in the next 2 years, and then set out clear steps to introduce a proper windfall tax. Yep. It is a sign of how far this Conservative government is off the road on competence and responsibility that they have not already done these basic things. People can no longer afford the cost of Tory failure. We need a stronger and fairer economy from a government committed to financial responsibility and a serious plan for growth that puts working people first. The very least that they can do is publish the numbers, and I urge all honourable members to support this motion today to do exactly that.
Question is, as on the order paper, Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffin.
Very much. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our constituents are worried about what the current global turbulence in the economy means for their jobs, their prospects and their families. They want to know that they can afford to get by, and that once the economic storm clouds have passed, which they will, that they can thrive. And it's these concerns, those of our constituents, that we're thinking about, rather than, and I say this in all due seriousness to the Honourable Lady, rather than misrepresenting, because I think she knows better, misrepresenting global trends, we are focused on protecting the most vulnerable and looking after our economy. And the most... Happily give way.
I just wonder if my honourable friend noticed, like I did, how little was mentioned of the real cause of the issues at the moment in global markets. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, driving energy prices up across the globe, driving inflation up across the globe, and driving interest rates. And no mention of that from the opposition. Whose side are they on? Whose side are they on when it comes to these situations? Because it's quite clear to me that they're not actually listening to the real issues underlying the global markets, and they don't understand what's going on.
Well, I thank my honourable member for North West Durham, and he makes a very important point. And I think that the whole of this House will want to acknowledge both the impact on our economy of COVID and the measures that both sides of this House supported, but also Putin's invasion in Ukraine. And it does us a great disservice to try and be overly partisan about the impacts on global trends that are happening in every Western economy. I'll give way.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for giving way. And the Minister has a strong track record, knowledgeable about finance in the private sector. So will he acknowledge that the mini-budget caused huge chaos in the markets, and notwithstanding the international issues which are a backdrop to this, this government has scored an own goal by making it a hell of a lot worse. Surely he, with his financial background, will acknowledge that. Yes.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the chair of the Select Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, does make some fair points, and we have acknowledged that mistakes have been made. The Prime Minister herself has said that, and I'm happy to say that in the spirit that the Honourable Lady acknowledges that there are wider factors at work in the economy, and it ill behoves this House to make those overly partisan points when our constituents are looking to us collectively as to what we can do. I'll make a little progress, and then we'll make a little progress and then come back, if I may. The most important thing we can do now in the national interest is to cement that financial and economic stability. That's what's vital, and that's what's vital for all of those who are concerned about their jobs, who have to pay their mortgages, those saving for retirement. And it's essential for businesses investing for the future and for society as we get through the current bout of rising prices. Bringing stability... I'll give way.
Minister for giving way. Last month, the Bank of England had to step in with a promise to buy up to £65 billion of government debt after pension funds, managing huge sums of money on behalf of retired people across the country, came close to collapse amidst an unprecedented meltdown in UK government bond markets following the government's mini-budget. Last week, the bank had to step in again. Now, BT's pension scheme has revealed the value of its assets plummeted by an estimated £11 billion in recent weeks. So will the Minister apologise for the chaos that his party has brought to the pension sector? And what can he say to my constituents to reassure them that their pensions are actually safe?
I thank the Honourable Lady for Wirral West, and I think all of us have constituents who are rightly worried in these times of global turbulence and increasing rates and increasing interest rates in every part of the world. She will forgive me, I hope, if I don't comment on the specific operations of the Bank of England. I think that would be inappropriate for me to do, other than to thank hard-working officials for their intervention that they've made over the last couple of weeks. I'll give way one more time, and then, if you'll forgive me, I'll make some progress.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. Of course, there are global factors that meant the situation was dangerous. Will he acknowledge that it's precisely because of those global factors that the new Prime Minister and Chancellor had to tread very, very carefully? And that's why what they did was so reckless and so damaging.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm not sure I can fully accept what the honourable member for Chesterfield will say, but what I will say is that on this side of the House, we are committed to the independence of our institutions. It's very important that people understand that. They have a valuable role to play, both the Bank of England and the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is why the Chancellor, when he presents his forecast to this House in just 8 parliamentary days' time, will ensure that those have been fully presented and signed off by the Office of Budget Responsibility.
I'm grateful, and I recognise the value of stability and predictability. Given the changes to the corporation tax rate, and given that the previous administration, my right honourable friend, the member for Richmond, was going to reduce the bank corporation tax surcharge from 8% to 3%, could my honourable friend confirm the government's intentions with respect to that and the assessment made on the effect of competitiveness in financial services for banks?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for Salisbury and pay tribute to my right honourable friend for Richmond for all that he did to put this economy in a strong position and to navigate the very difficult shoals of the unprecedented COVID pandemic. I'd like to make a little bit of progress, and I'll make a little bit of progress and then give way. As the Chancellor has said, all measures at this point remain on the table. He will indulge me if I don't make that policy at the dispatch box today. His point is well understood, and it is a point that others have also made to me as Financial Secretary. I hope.
Can I just simply point out that if the rate is retained as an 8% surcharge, banks will be paying 33%, and when added to the employment cost for national insurance, may have issues in terms of competitiveness. If that is necessary, please could he make clear to banks and the markets so that they can plan for the future?
Well, as I said to this House a moment ago, we have just 8 sitting days now. Part of my role is to stay in very close touch with our very valued banking community and to continue to drive the competitiveness of the United Kingdom as a place for the financial services sector to make the prodigious contribution to the economy that we, particularly on this side of the House, value. Now, as the Chancellor has said, we will continue to prioritise fiscal stability, and the United Kingdom will always pay its way. We will fund our promises, and we remain, Madam Deputy Speaker, committed to fiscal discipline. And that means we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that debt as a share of the economy comes down in the medium term. I will give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Minister. I know he's relatively new to the job, and I hope he lasts longer than some of his predecessors. The Bank of England has made clear the mini-budget has caused a material risk to UK's financial stability. The fact is that, as has been said already, our constituents' mortgages have gone up and will be going up for £500 and up to £900 in London and the South East. Can he tell us what his government's going to do to bring down those mortgage rates, that many of them are going to be directly as a consequence of the mini-budget failures and fiasco?
Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank the Honourable Lady for Bethnal Green? My apologies, sorry. I am new to this role. I was in the process, actually, of telling the Honourable Lady in the House exactly what this government will do. No one should trivialise the impact of rising global interest rates on mortgages. The last time mortgages were at this level were under her government, and not after the backdrop of a global pandemic and a war on European soil. No, I think I've been relatively generous, Madam Deputy Speaker, in taking interventions from the opposition. I'm going to make some progress because I'm sure you've got many people who would like to speak. So, as the House knows, we will publish the medium-term fiscal plan, which will be fully reported on by the OBR, which will set out our approach to fiscal responsibility, which is the controllable variable we can do in government to help reduce the rates of interest going forward. We remain committed to pursuing growth as the driver of prosperity for all. The creation of investment zones. I'll give way.
Would my right honourable friend agree that this government's policy of creating investment zones is going to boost business and create jobs for hard-working people in Southend West, I hope, and across the country? It's the essence of financial responsibility that's going to put us on the path to long-term growth and long-term financial health.
Well, the new member for Southend makes a very important point. We are absolutely committed to investment zone. I wish her well with her campaign to attract one to Southend-on-Sea. And as the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities has noted, this will be a transformational programme for the whole United Kingdom, and I hope many members opposite get behind this programme and seek to attract them to their own constituencies. We are continuing to deliver support for families by cutting national insurance, and we will save an average of £330 for 28 million hard-working people. We'll deliver reforms to boost housing supply, accelerate infrastructure projects across the country, enabling growth where it is needed most. I'll give way.
Extremely grateful to him. Last week we had the repeal of the Health and Social Care Levy Bill. I spoke in that debate and I said that I hoped that that repeal would not lead to the cap on social care being watered down. As I understand, the cap may now be delayed or even not come into force at all. I think we should all be very concerned about that. The previous Prime Minister, one of his great achievements, I thought, was finally bringing a tangible policy to social care. Does he accept that in many ways, when we repealed the bill, it would have been better to know then that that repeal would have had a material impact on social care policy?
Right. My honourable friend for Suffolk South makes his point typically strongly, and he, like me, will look forward to hearing the medium-term fiscal strategy in short term. The decisions, the Honourable Lady earlier asked what we will do to protect households with their interest rates and mortgages. And the decisions that were taken by the Chancellor earlier this week, difficult decisions, I won't give way at the moment, will ensure that we continue to grow the economy. Those decisions will raise around £32 billion every year, about which, Madam Deputy Speaker, to date, and perhaps they'll use the opportunity of this debate to enlighten the House, the opposition has said very little about how they would find the money to do that. That brings me to our energy price guarantee, which is a landmark policy which will help millions of people get through this most difficult winter. Independent and external forecasts expect this to reduce inflation by around 5 percentage points. It's one of the most generous schemes in the world and was the biggest single expense in the growth plan, with an estimated cost of around £60 billion between now and the end of March. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I think the energy price guarantee and the support scheme is something that this whole House can support, as well as many of our constituents. But in constituencies like mine in Edinburgh, many of my households are off-grid. And although there is a separate scheme, there's also an issue of dual use on a single site. To make sure there's parity and equity through the rolling through of that scheme, will he undertake to make sure that there is an ongoing review to ensure that none of my constituents miss out